Hello, this is Ryan Fritz with Science of Cardio, delivering the latest and greatest and the pros and cons of exercise science. Hello, this is Ryan Fritz with Science of Cardio. Today we are talking about rest and recovery. They are very different things. When I think of rest, I think of an off day, and when I think of recovery, I think of maybe a lighter workout. So an example would be if you run 5 miles, maybe a recovery day might be doing like a mile or a 2 mile jog instead of a 5 mile run. Strength training, maybe you do 50 to 70% of your max versus 90 to 100% on kind of a heavy lift day. So maybe a lighter strength day. Very important topic. I've kind of worked with both sides of the spectrum as far as athletes and just general population clients. A professional or Olympic grade athlete has a lot of scientific kind of periodization and some people that are highly educated on kind of when to rest, when to recover, and strategic, work days and rest days. Those create the best results, and that's why they perform optimally. On the other side, you have, kind of the sedentary person that hasn't done anything for 20 years. They also need to be aware or educated on kind of recovery. So at the beginning of the year, a lot of people want to get into exercising. So we're kind of getting into that time frame, and they haven't worked out for years or haven't done any physical activity for a long time. And the best advice that I can recommend is just kind of ease and creep and micro progress kind of into a normal or higher intensity. Rome was not built in a day. You can get there gradually. If it takes you, 3 more months to get to a goal, no sweat. One thing that Science of Cardio really tries to do and talk and educate our clients is about sustainability. How can we keep exercising well into our 60s, 70s, 80s? How can we keep moving later on in life without joint pain? And there's a strategy or kind of a scientific way to do that. We also just encourage people to learn and grow and figure out more information about how your body works, listen to your joints, your body, your mechanics, talk to professionals, and just ask a ton of questions. It's kind of the old saying, no question's a dumb question. The more information you gather, the better it helps you out. And then you can make your own kind of decisions based off of those engagements that you get. So some pros with kind of recovery. Basically, you're letting your body heal itself. A lot of people think that training is what creates tissue adaptations, and you get better cell mitochondria from training, and you're working on growing muscle tissue in your training. The training is a part or a piece or a slice of the pie. It is kind of a part of the system, and you have to stress your tissues and cells. And then the other part is rest. That rest allows it to repair and recover, and that creates kind of improvement. So we have this long cycle of stressing and then resting, recovering, and then kind of adaptation. And then you do that over and over and over weeks, months, years, and your body adapts. It gets, more density in the bones. Your muscles get stronger. Maybe your muscles get bigger, depending on your goals. Your mitochondria, your cardiovascular endurance, ability gets better over time. But there is a plateau, and there's actually a downside to pushing. So I'm sure everybody's heard of a plateau. A plateau is essentially kind of when you first start exercising and you get into, you start lifting more weights and doing, maybe more mileage or time or distance or whatever your kind of goal is. And eventually you kind of keep progressing up the ladder, and then you kind of hit that sticking point. You get, plateau or stuck, and you really kind of can't improve from that point. To me, that's where a skilled and an expert strength and conditioning coach or professional is worth their weight, they can say, okay, here's these 3 or 4 other challenges that we can add to your nervous system, to your cells, to your tissues, that will help you overcome this plateau. They're different for cardiovascular endurance type of goals than they are from strength training or hypertrophy or muscle growth goals. So I encourage you to explore those and find out different ways to improve endurance, different ways to improve strength. There's lots of different variations. And I think the principles apply to kind of average beginner, strength training person or the advanced, Olympic athlete. Science is science, and you basically get similar results no matter who the subject is. Everyone's going to have a little variation, but if you put 400 pounds on your back a couple times a week, you're eventually going to get used to that, or you're going to break. And this is kind of what brings this whole podcast up. Is I have a client who was asking me questions about how much is too much training, and she has a son that trains and runs, and they're running 5 times a week, and this particular person has had knee surgeries and had knee problems young, high school age knee problems. And that's where the discussion gets very gray and it becomes very individualized. I think if you are enjoying your training, that is a plus and a perk. I think if you're fighting through pain, that is not good. There's a difference between, hey, I'm working hard and progressing, and this really sucks and it's hard, I'm hurting, to struggle every day to get walking out of bed and get moving. Those are kind of not good adaptations. Those are going to cause and create problems down the road. And my goal is to not do that. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want people miserable and not being able to reach their goals. I don't want anybody to be miserable and not reaching their goals because they have joint pains and they're stiff and achy and it hurts to move. This is kind of how I train. We definitely need to push ourselves, but we also need to rest. There's a balance. I really like Tai Chi in that sense of kind of the Asian culture. Tai Chi, there's this yin and yang, if you push, you pull, if you move to the right, you move to the left. I think that balance is very important, and we often sometimes forget that exercise is stress on the body. When you stress it too much too often, things either adjust and handle that, or they don't, and they break. And I hear a ton of spouses and family members and friends, having people in their life that broke. Hey, my ACL tore, my meniscus is gone, I have this pain, it hurts to get out of bed. There are things you can do about it. So I encourage you to check us out, kind of look into some of our social media information and see what we're doing. We try to do the most scientific approach to saving your joints. And this is something that you don't think about when you're 15 or 20, even 20s, maybe in your 30s, depending on the person, what they're doing. But you start getting kind of 40s, 50s, definitely into your 60s, 70s, 80s. You are very thoughtful about what you're doing, how you're doing it, how much time you're involved in kind of working on those. I believe wholeheartedly that those time investments pay off. And I have people in their mid-70s that move better than they did in their late 60s because they're doing things the right way. And, they still have issues. They have challenges with arthritis when the weather's cold or it rains, but they're learning how to kind of work through that aging process. And there's definitely kind of benefit to learning and getting kind of skills and ideas and thoughts on other options and alternatives So again, kind of, I said this in some other podcasts, think different and train different. So some solutions to kind of this rest recovery, typically depending on where you were taught about strength and conditioning, anybody that is half educated with some science, you'll hear, every other day, strength train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, do your, cardiovascular Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. There should be an off day in the mix of that. I'm experimenting with what I call a sustainable kind of strength and conditioning weekly program, and learning a lot, what to do, what not to do. Doing some things too frequently is kind of detrimental and set you back a little bit. Doing things not enough is also not helpful. We don't get results and we don't get those goals that we want. So there's definitely a balance. And if you have more questions or you want to comment or, let me know, I would love to talk about this. It's a very complex topic. So hit me up on social media or email me. You can text me. At the end of the day, I think we should be doing some sort of strength training multiple times a week, and we should also be doing some sort of cardiovascular challenge. So kind of the current place where I'm at as far as strength and conditioning science goes, I am doing 1 day a week where I'm doing interval cardiovascular, so fast, slow. Keep an open mind. You can do a fast, slow swim in the pool. You can do a fast, slow bike, like a sprint, or kind of fast, high intensity, low intensity intervals. And then kind of taking that high intensity part into the strength training, you get to, heavy lifting. And again, these things kind of vary on the person, the age, their experience. CrossFit might be a option if you're able to tolerate it. It might be the worst thing that you can do to your joints. So you have to kind of experiment around with that, but listen to your body. Your body will tell you, a day, 2, 3 days after you did something challenging. So kind of a high intensity or heavy lift day, if you will. I also try to do 1 day a week where I am doing an isometric or working on kind of static holds. This might be like a wall squat. I have a machine that I've been using for a couple years called the ISOFIT. You can maximally push force into an object and you get some really cool kind of strength gains and adaptations with that. I also think that we need to challenge our muscles kind of on the stopping mechanism, or eccentric, or what is called a plyometric or negative. Our body does these kind of go, pause, hold, and then stop things. So we need to maintenance those 3 different areas, and we need to challenge those and progress them and be thoughtful about the whole system and spectrum of muscle contractions. And then I'm gonna have another day a week where I'm doing steady state cardio. So this might be, jogging for 2 miles. If that's really hard on your knees and not a possible modality, cycling is great, swimming is great, walking, hiking is awesome. I also will throw in the sauna in there. So there's some cool literature studies that talk about sauna use is equivalent to about 70% cardiovascular challenge. So this is a great way to save your knees and your hips and your joints. You sweat, you get some toxins out. There's a huge hormonal challenge to your body. You get these changes and adaptations. So again, really encourage you to think outside the box as far as what modalities to use. Can you do a kind of circuit strength training thing where you're getting your heart rate up and lifting heavier weights? Yes. Should you, be doing a longer, slower intensity challenge? Yes. So I try to hit a little bit of the spectrum all the way and kind of, take those scientific strength and conditioning principles and really push the envelope on how can I challenge this? How can I challenge this with little joint stress? Or how can I really make this max effort with low impact? So this is what keeps us moving and keeps us going. Again, I don't like people broken. I hate seeing young people that are broken because they don't know. They don't know other options. They don't know other solutions on, how do you do cardio. There are other things than running. You can hop on a rower. It's upper and lower body challenges. You can go for different time durations. You can go for minute sprint. You can go for a 10-minute kind of medium pace. You can go for a 30-minute kind of slow pace. You could literally use one modality and do 4 to 5 different training styles or kind of different workouts in a week or, in a training session. There's a lot of information on the internet. Find out those scientific principles, use those. Again, give me information on kind of thoughts, ideas, what you think or have questions about. Hopefully these things will pay off and they'll save you from having those surgeries. I would like to pride kind of myself and a lot of my clients. I have clients that, hey, the doctor says I need to have knee surgery. I need to have back or hip surgery. And we start doing some corrective exercises. We start doing some movements, some isometrics, some thoughtful exercises to maybe their condition or problem. And it really pays off and they don't have to have those surgeries. That is the coolest thing that a trainer can have experienced. Is my doctor said that I don't need to have knee surgery or I don't need that cortisone injection. Like that's pretty cool. It makes me feel good. So those are definitely wins as far as, helping my clients and people out. So there definitely needs to be a high kind of intensity strength day. And I kind of do a variation of kind of myometrics, isometrics, plyometrics. My personal situation, I have some scoliosis in my back. I've had problems doing power, clean, deadlift, push press because of my spine not being perfectly centered. So I've come up with ways and adaptations to basically still challenge those positions, but not do it in a hurtful or harmful way. So one thing I have done is I've done isometric deadlifts where I use an isofit or I'll load up a barbell with more weight than I can move and I'll pull up as hard as I can. You can change the angles and work different positions. And it's a really cool way to kind of hit 100% max effort without having 400, 300, 600 pounds and really high risk or kind of putting you in a dangerous situation. So one thing I love about isometrics is you can go max effort safely. I can take a group of people, 15, 30, 50, 75, and I can have them do isometrics together. And they're all getting challenged to the kind of their capacity or levels, which is amazing. It is almost impossible to do that on a dynamic or kind of a group exercise platform where everybody's moving. A lot of people, push and say they can, but I think it's unsafe. And, we have to use the science and the information that's out there to maximize our benefits and goals. So let's talk about marathons. Marathon is a very hard and awesome kind of feat. My wife has run a marathon. I have not. I think that it would be really hard on my body to do that. So I choose or opt out of doing that. I usually, about 4 miles is when my body starts to kind of talk to me and tell me not to. So I've kind of gone up to about 6 miles with running. And I have a lot of soreness, a lot of aches and pains, start getting plantar fasciitis. For me, I'm a sprinter. I'm a power athlete. That's what I like to do. That's what my body's built for. But again, food for thought, marathons, power to you if you can do them, if you can tolerate them. I have run into a lot of people that are, marathon junkies. One of my clients, her husband, has run a marathon in every state. A marathon is roughly about 52,000 steps or foot contacts. So food for thought, when you do a marathon, you're doing about 26,000 impacts on each leg. or 52,000 compressions on your spine on a marathon day. So that's a lot of reps. Imagine doing 52,000 squats or 26,000 push-ups in one day. So that'll get you thinking. My wife just got done writing a book, and one of the persons in the book, they have run like 200 marathons. So I'm going to do the math real quick. So they have done in their marathon career, they have done 10,400,000 repetitions on foot contacts or leg movements. So if stuff isn't working optimally or it's not symmetrical, the right leg's working different than the left leg, or the left leg pushes harder than the right leg, this is definitely going to show up. This is where surgeries and joint replacements come into play. So, be wise, be smart. We know information. There's a ton of modalities that you can do in lieu of running. I highly recommend that you consider options for cardiovascular exercise. I'm not opposed to running. I run here and there, but I am very tuned into stop when you're feeling pain. If you're noticing things, I try not to push or punch through a lot of hard, painful, super challenging. The other approach is kind of that, taking days off, resting. If you work hard, let your body recover. There was a study came out maybe a year ago talking about CrossFit. It takes up to 96 hours for your body to heal the cells that are damaged from doing high intensity exercise. So I would consider a marathon or an ultra marathon high intensity. If you've done them before, you can be sore for a couple days, a week. If you've done some crazy hiking, you'll be sore for days or a week. That's your body trying to heal itself. So listen to it and, find other solutions, find other options. You can still kind of cross train. You can bike and swim and row and do other modalities while training and getting ready for that marathon or running event. Basically it's your body gets to a point with endurance where it can do it. And, you build up and you do your progressions over time. Like when you get to kind of that week before the race, you're either conditioned or you're not. And you're either going to tolerate it or stuff's going to break. So I encourage and I hope that nothing breaks, but be smart about your training. And just wanted to give you kind of some perspective, some thought about kind of that marathon impacting on your bones, your joints, your ligaments, tendons, your muscles, your nervous system, your cellular system. A lot of stress. So, but it yields results. You lose weight, you burn a lot of calories. I do not want to look like Skeletor. I do not want to be 100 pounds. I want some meat in my bones. I want to be able to lift stuff, get firewood and move some stuff around. If I, have to scrap or kind of get in a tiffle with one of my brothers or, somebody, I want to be able to hold my own a little bit. I don't want to be Hercules or anything crazy, but definitely kind of that balance is where I'm looking or coming from. So as far as recovery, I listen to my body when it comes to recovery. I will do, 1 to 3 days of kind of recovery after something. For me, I'm a 2-day kind of delayed onset muscle soreness, or I get that soreness after 2 days. Some people get it the next day. Some people, it takes 3 or 4 days. What happens is the more inflamed you are, the more trauma and stress you have, the longer it takes for your body to kind of start that repair process. And that is where that soreness comes in. So if you're sore on that second day, that whole first day, everything's inflamed and just agitated. So, you got to kind of pick and choose how you train that. If you're training for a kind of sport goal, that is very different than kind of a controlled scenario in the gym. In the gym, you can say, hey, I'm going to lift 100 pounds this week. Next week, I'm going to go for 110. The following week, I'm going to try for 120. In the sports world, it's I got to run this fast. I got to get to the ball. I got to hit this person. Do whatever you can to get the job done. And I think that's why we have so many injuries with sports. I feel like the fitness world, we can control that a little bit better. And you have opportunity and options to control that. So that's where kind of that recovery is a scientific thought of I'm going to rest and let my body heal, and then I'm going to push it hard. And usually you get more efficient and faster results that way. When I was in college learning about bodybuilding and max strength, how to improve max strength, they were talking about taking off a week before their competitions. And I'm like, why the heck would you do that? Well, so your cells turn over every 7 to 14 days. So you really can take off a week or two before you lose anything. So you'll have, in competitive sports, you'll have tapers or kind of an unload. And that is scientifically or strategically placed to allow your body to heal itself so that when you go to game day or competition or kind of race day, you can go 100%. And you're really not going to lose that much. You're probably not going to lose any of your conditioning. If you've been training for 10, 12, 20 weeks, taking off one day, or less than, 15% is not going to affect you. So research that, find out more information about tapering and unloading and super compensation, really cool scientific principles with strength and conditioning. So sleep is the key to growing muscles and helping repair tissue. I'm not going to talk about this too much. Get sleep, 8+ hours. I think that's why we grow so much as teenagers, is because we are getting a lot of sleep. Anybody who has kids, or even I remember when I was a teenager, I used to be able to sleep like 10, 12 hours. Your body's growing and it's working hard, and it grows when you sleep. So your fingernails, your hair, your tissues, they all grow and repair themselves when you're sleeping. So I can't emphasize enough, sleep, sleep, sleep. Any bodybuilder is very well aware of sleeping. So highly encourage and recommend you to get 8+ hours of sleep a night or per day. So another thing that I do is usually quarterly, I will take a week off. And this sounds a little crazy, but there is a ton of scientific research and meta-analysis and data that support better gains after what's called a recovery or an unload week. So I try to do it quarterly. It doesn't always work that way. Easter is a good time, summer vacation, Thanksgiving, and then somewhere in winter, maybe Christmas break. You kind of have to figure those out for your schedule and your lifestyle. But taking a week off, again, your cells turn over every 7 to 14 days. So you're not going to really lose any major gains in a week. And what it does is it allows your body to kind of repair, reset. And then what I've noticed is if I'm pushing for 3 or 4 months with a routine and I kind of start to plateau, you're doing, let's say the first month you're doing 3 sets, the second month you're doing 4 sets, the third month you're doing 5 sets. After a while, it's not challenging, you're not feeling it, you're not changing, there's no adaptations happening. Use that kind of recovery and that rest period to repair. And so when you get back into it, that first week, you might go back to 3 sets and you're like, oh man, I'm sore, I'm out of shape or deconditioned. That is kind of what we want, is we want your body to be challenged. If you're doing the same thing every day and, infinite or forever, then your body doesn't adapt. It just stays at homeostasis. So very important scientific principle. Change your workouts up, take off here and there, maybe quarterly or yearly or bi-yearly, but there should be kind of an unload or off week in your routine somewhere. If you're doing a phase where you're doing endurance strength training, maybe your next phase should be heavy lifting, and then maybe the next phase after that is hypertrophy or muscle growth, kind of the middle of the road, 6 to 12 reps. So get kind of educated and ask questions, learn and grow mentally and physically. But the education will pay off dividends on you reaching your goals. I think one of the reasons that people don't get results or plateau in their training programs is because they're overtraining and they're working too much. If these people basically added a rest or recovery day, they would see better results. So food for thought. If you're doing something 6 days a week, maybe have a recovery day in the middle of your week and see what happens. Again, adaptation, try things out, experiment, see if anything breaks that plateau. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But, if you're training and you're working out, you're not really losing anything. I have found that, a lot of people with weight loss challenges and people that can't lose weight, sometimes they get kind of to this point where they're overstressed, their cortisol levels are high, they're training too much, they're doing too much stuff. An example would be, somebody getting injured and they stop training because of an injury and then they lose a bunch of weight. So that would be, cortisol or hormonal related, and then kind of cutting back on that high intensity too frequently, too much, too often. Might be a consideration or a thought for that. So getting back to my client, running 5 days a week, I don't know if it's necessary. Will it decrease your body mass? Yes, possibly. Is it a lot of force on your knees? Yes. Does it create adaptations? Yes. If you progress it right, everything does. Can it create problems, arthritis, tendonitis? Yes. Strength training will do the same thing. So again, I encourage you to learn and get information. You can challenge your metabolism and your cardiovascular system without moving. So check out Sauna Science. We have another podcast on sauna science that's very informative. There's a doctor, Rhonda Patrick. She has a company called Found My Fitness. She's got some podcasts. She's awesome on the sauna science. I love following and listening to the meta-analysis, the latest data and research on saunas and how they benefit hormonal, muscle, testosterone, and nervous system, and cellular and cardiovascular system. It's awesome stuff. Solutions: get in the sauna. If you can do that daily, awesome. Try to sweat, 20, 30 minutes a day. You should be having one day where you don't do anything and you're completely resting. Going out and getting firewood or shoveling, it's still work. It's still stress on your nervous system, your muscle system, your tendons, your cells. So we got to be thoughtful about kind of rest and recovery. Recovery is a lower intensity, less. Rest is off. That's kind of how I think about it. Hopefully this information was enlightening and helpful. I encourage you to work hard, but also rest equally as hard, and push yourself, but also know when to kind of pull back on the reins and let the reins go. So those are some great tips that I've been taught over the years. If you're not working hard, you're not going to get optimal results. And if you're working too hard, you might have some orthopedic type of issues or problems with that. So stay balanced, stay healthy. That goes with eating, sleeping. Everything's a balancing act. You need to, eat well most of the time. You need to strength train, challenge muscles most of the week. You need to challenge your cardiovascular system, cells, and tendons, ligaments, and metabolism, most of the week. But there is science and there's strategies, there's periodization, there's ways to do that. So I encourage you to research more, ask if you have any questions or thoughts, comments, concerns about rest and recovery. So thanks, and we'll catch you next time.